as I tell you, this was a teaching that went back to the Second Temple days, even before the days of Yeshua. So it was way back as a very early teaching. And how far it goes back, does it go back to Ezra? I'm not sure, but it certainly goes back to Judah coming back after the Babylonian exile. And essentially, it's a homiletic teaching that specifically is to be taught in the month of Elul, which is what we're in, leading up to the Feast of Trumpets, Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, and the Feast of Tabernacles. It's a specific teaching that's to be given to all of Israel to prepare you for these fall holidays. Now, why would that be? Because the fall holidays, when they are fulfilled by the Messiah, all of these events that we're talking about, the return of the Messiah, judgment of the world, day of the Lord, and the ingathering of all of his saints is to be realized and fulfilled in the Feast of Trumpets, Yom Kippur, and the Feast of Tabernacles. And so they give you this homiletic teaching to prepare your heart and soul to get ready for this could be the year, this could be the generation in which the true fulfillment of trumpets, atonement, and tabernacles takes place. Isn't that amazing? That they had way back, those men, those brethren could see the symbolism of how this is all supposed to come together. In fact, in preparation for trumpets, atonement, and tabernacles, let me summarize for you essentially what this teaching is. The Lord wants us to be comforted. We have said that we were forsaken and forgotten. We were afflicted, storm-tossed, not comforted, but the Lord will be our comforter. We were exiled without his compassion, but the Lord will gather us again and show us his compassion, and we will joy in the Lord wearing garments of salvation. That's the message. By the way, if we could get some churches to know about the scattered exiles of Israel, this will preach on Sunday morning. Right now, it preaches real good in a Messianic assembly. Because in a Messianic assembly, we talk about the house of Israel returning. We talk about the house of Israel and the house of Judah being joined together. We talk about all of the saints, all that belong to Israel, coming back one day to be in the land. And we have a sense of anticipation in this generation for the first time in many generations. We see the reality of this beginning to take shape. Not only have we seen the house of Judah go back to the land and the modern state of Israel, but the modern Messianic movement, particularly among independent Messianics, we're talking about the house of Israel being identified, scattered in the nations, and they're talking about going back to the land now for the first time again too. Just as I mentioned to you before, we are the generation, this is the group that has the testimony of Yeshua, turning to the Torah, learning about these prophecies, and wanting to obey the Lord with all of our heart, soul, and might so we can go back to the land. That's what Moses said, that we would return with all of our hearts when we turn back to all those commandments. There are a lot of teachers in the Messianic movement, some of my Messianic Jewish brethren, who don't believe that the Torah should be taught to all people. Some have stood up and said the Torah is really just for the Jews. I find it absolutely ludicrous when I hear them say that. The Torah was given to the children of Israel. There were no Jews standing there when it was given. They were called Hebrews. They were the children of Israel, and they were all Hebrews. The tribe of Judah and the house of Judah wasn't in leadership of anything in those days. So it wasn't given to the Jews, it was given to the children of Israel. Now today, due to the brainwashing, we think the world's divided into Jews and Gentiles. No, the world is divided in between believers and unbelievers. And the believers are called the children of Israel, both native-born and aliens and sojourners who are with them. They're all called Hebrews. And despite the best efforts of Paul in the New Testament to emphasize that if you are in the Messiah, you are of the seed of Abraham, which means you're a Hebrew, the rest of the world continues to go around with this fabricated definition the world is just Jews and Gentiles. And so therefore, if you believe that, well then I guess the Torah was given to the Jews. The whole thing is fundamentally flawed. The Torah was in fact given to all people who wanted to believe in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And it specifically says to the native and to the alien. And it doesn't make any difference what nation you originate from, what ethnic group you were born into, what community you have to hail from. If you want to come to the Lord and keep these commandments, you too can worship the Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and you too, your sacrifices will be acceptable on his altar right with the native born. That's what it says. And that's what it says is going to be in the end. Now, there is no, let me just get this clear, there is no dispensation in the great plan of God where there's just a world of just Jews and Gentiles for a while and then we'll revert back. God doesn't have plan B, plan C, plan D, plan E. God has plan A. It's the original one that starts in Genesis 1:1, goes all the way through the rest of the scripture and the prophetic word. This particular homiletic teaching is based on that understanding, not on the understanding that there are Jews and Gentiles in the world. So I say to you that this homiletic teaching is for every person who would want to be a part of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And oh, by the way, when this greater exodus happens, I don't care what nation that you live in, I don't care what ethnic group, when this greater exodus happens and we get ready to go to the kingdom, you are welcome, I don't care who you are welcome to come with Israel and join with Israel of the commonwealth of Israel and come to the land too. The land has been promised to you also. It's promised to any who will come to God in faith, just as Abraham, his faith was counted for righteousness. It's any of those who are the true descendants of Abraham. And the true descendants aren't necessarily physical descendants. They are descendants by faith, Paul has taught. And I agree with Paul on this point, because that's exactly what the Torah says too. This teaching, the consolation of Israel, specifically is addressed in this context. I want to show you some additional verses scattered in the midst of this that shows you how powerfully Isaiah spoke to all peoples of this. Isaiah 52 and verse 7. I'm sure you're familiar with this verse. How lovely on the mountains are the feet of him who brings good news, who announces peace and brings good news of happiness, who announces salvation and says to Zion, your God reigns. Now, let's just fast forward to the New Testament for a moment. We preach the good news, right? Let's be New Testament believers here. We preach the good news, the gospel, right? And we announce the name of the Messiah, salvation. Yeshua is the Messiah, right? We announce salvation. And we say to Zion, all believers, your God reigns. In fact, I've sang some songs that